CBS Evening News with Charles Kuralt, substituting for Walter Cronkite, who was on assignment in Downey, California. And Eric Severine in Washington, Morton Dean aboard the Nixon campaign train in Springfield, Ohio, Bill Plant in Fort Worth, Texas, Terry Drinkwater in Los Angeles, and tonight, part 2 of a special report, Where They Stand, the candidates on the issues of Campaign 68.
Good evening. The Apollo 7 astronauts are safe and in good health tonight aboard the aircraft carrier Essex, having completed what space agency officials call a perfect mission. Walter Cronkite reports.
For Apollo 7, astronauts Walter Schirra, Don Isley, and Walter Cunningham, a successful end to a more than successful 11-day space mission. It began early this morning, and this is how it went.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Retrofire. Schirra says we're burning right on the mark.
Gimbal motors are off. Circuit breakers. Gimbal motor control. 4 open.
Separation should be coming right now.
Pull. 5 big handle. Okay.
Now they're turning the blunt end forward, the heat shield forward. That heat shield that must take 3,000 degrees of heat. As at this tremendous speed, it re-enters the density of the atmosphere. At 3,000 degrees of heat against the heat shield, like at the intensity of a blowtorch. The Apollo 7 spacecraft has passed over Houston. It's less than 60 miles high now. It is back in the atmosphere. Heat is building up on the heat shield. It's now about at New Orleans. The blackout starts, blackout of communications in about 2 minutes from now. And this is a critical point, of course, of the flight of Apollo 7. We should have had the drogue chute deployment confirmed by now.
We should have main chute deploy.
For the next 20 minutes, there was nothing to do but watch the empty water all around the Essex. The only really nervous moments of this entire mission. For those 20 minutes, there was no word from Apollo 7, no signal of any kind, raising fears that something might have gone wrong in the very last minutes. What it was, though, was something not entirely unexpected. Apollo 7, called by Schirra a fine spacecraft but a lousy boat, instead of staying on its bottom like this, turned turtle in the water with its nose down. The astronauts then couldn't send any signals from their radio antenna there underwater. They inflated 3 bags and brought the spacecraft back upright like this. Once this was done, the antenna was free. Apollo 7 was located. The crew finally brought to the Essex 50 minutes after splashdown.
The astronauts there in the door. Walter Schirra on the left, Don Isley there, and Walt Cunningham. They're in their NASA flight suits. The suits are wet, showing some evidence of the rain shower, which has been going on outside. The band is playing now. Anchors away.
Good pictures of the men as they descend the ladder to the hangar deck and to sick bay for their medical examinations. With the crew on board, the final task was to bring the spacecraft in, which was done in very short order. The Essex steaming 4 miles to the pickup point, meeting the frogmen who had stayed with Apollo 7 since helping the crew out of the spacecraft and into the helicopter sling, and then the helicopter which brought them to the Essex. While this was going on, the astronauts received a telephone call from the president.
We here in the Capitol and all over this country and the world are so very proud of you this morning. As the eyes of the earth have been opened upon you, so have the hopes of the world lifted to you.
Thus ended the flight of Apollo 7. The immediate reaction of space agency officials is that this was a magnificent flight, perhaps nearer perfect than any other in the space program. 2 or 3 difficulties experienced by Apollo 7 must be investigated, but the enthusiasm of the NASA people could well be translated into a commitment to send the next Apollo to the moon. At Cape Kennedy, that spaceship sits atop its huge Saturn V rocket, 5 times more powerful than the one that sent Apollo 7 aloft, sits there poised for flight. Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders may well start for the moon December 20th and be circling it on Christmas Day. And if that flight goes well, man, American man, could be on the moon as President Kennedy had planned before this decade is out. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News Space Center, Downey, California.
The United States and North Vietnam meet for the 27th time in Paris tomorrow, and there were more rumors today that the North Vietnamese may use the occasion to respond to the latest American terms for an end of the bombing. Some intriguing remarks on that subject came today from French Foreign Minister Michel Debré. He praised what he called President Johnson's courageous decision to change American policy toward Vietnam, and he said it is already bearing fruit. In Saigon, President Thieu of South Vietnam appeared to be trying to give the impression that his government is not at odds with Washington over a bombing halt. Thieu, after another in a series of meetings with U.S. Ambassador Bunker, said he does not oppose a suspension if there is good reason to believe that North Vietnam will do some military de-escalating of its own. According to our diplomatic correspondent, Marvin Kalb, Washington is not interpreting that as any change in Thieu's basic demands. Kalb said the official view is that Thieu simply is trying to improve his public position in case a bombing halt is announced. In the war today, the only significant action reported was an enemy shelling of the U.S. Marine base at Dong Ha, near the demilitarized zone. 3 Marines and 3 South Vietnamese civilians were killed, including a blind girl who was under care at the base hospital.
It used to be, lady, you had no rights. No right to vote, no right to property, no right to the wage you earned. That was back when you were laced in, hemmed in, and left with not a whole lot to do. That was back when you had to sneak up to the attic if you wanted a cigarette. Smoke in front of a man? Heaven forbid.
You've come a long way, baby, to get where you got to today.
Introducing new Virginia Slims, the slim filter cigarette for women only, tailored for the feminine hand. Slimmer than the fat cigarettes men smoke, with a kind of flavor women like. Rich, mild Virginia flavor. New extra long Virginia Slims in the slim purse pack.
You've got your own cigarette now, baby. You've come a long, long way.
Richard Nixon employed techniques from the past today as he campaigned across Ohio. The whistle-stop tour and the rear platform speech. CBS News correspondent Morton Dean has the story.
Sunrise in Ohio. The 15-car train called the Nixon Victory Special left Cincinnati to begin a 271-mile journey that included 9 stops. Mary Goldwater traveled a similar route 4 years ago. The candidate's car was as spiffy as you'll find these days, but in a campaign that embraces computers and modern communications gadgets, the idea of a whistle-stop tour seems even more anachronistic than it really is. Before television and the jet plane spoiled everything, candidates spoke from the rear platform of trains. And at several stops today, the Republican nominee did just that as he assailed Hubert Humphrey and the Democratic administration.
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Listen to the new foreign policy you're going to be voting for. The old is clear. It is a policy of failure. I challenge my opponent to name one area in the world today, my friends, where the United States is better off than it was 8 years ago. He cannot, whether it's Africa or the Mideast, leave out Vietnam or Western Europe. We've seen the prospects for peace go down. We've seen respect for America go down. And my friends, I say it's time for a change. It's time for a new team. It's time for a new policy. And I pledge that kind of a change and that kind of a new policy.
Security was ever present on this busiest day of Richard Nixon's campaign for the presidency. There was one nervous moment when someone chucked a small hunk of debris. missing the candidate and his family, but causing security agents to protectively block off one side of the platform. Morton Dean, CBS News, on the Nixon campaign train.
Hubert Humphrey has had the campaign task not only of running against Nixon and George Wallace, but also of trying to patch up his badly divided party. Today, as Humphrey arrived in Texas, there were signs that his mending efforts have had some success. Bill Plant reports from Fort Worth.
The climate did seem improved for Humphrey's second foray into Texas. Unlike the last time, Governor John Connally greeted the candidate at the airport, as did Connally's bitter enemy within the party, Senator Ralph Yarborough. Connally assured Humphrey that things were indeed looking up.
I don't want to mislead you or anyone else, though, particularly our own people. We've got a lot of work to do in this state. It's a close election here. And I think the worst thing any party can do is to take too much for granted. I think maybe the Republicans have done precisely that.
The new unity effort was evident in Humphrey's Fort Worth crowd, his biggest noon-hour gathering of the campaign.
Now, I think we need to ask ourselves the basic questions. And with a great audience like this, it's a special pleasure to talk sense and to talk constructively about the issues. Who can the American people trust? And that's the word, trust, to lead this country.
Though the Nixon lead over Hubert Humphrey is small in Texas, and it is reasonable for Humphrey to assume that he does have a fighting chance here, the Democrats' late-starting organization and unity drive may not be enough, especially with the Wallace factor. Because in 1960, even with Lyndon Johnson on the ticket, Richard Nixon came within 43,000 votes of carrying Texas. Bill Plant, CBS News, with the Humphrey campaign in Fort Worth.
At a rally in Oshkosh, Wisconsin today, hecklers threw rocks, eggs, and tomatoes at George Wallace. When an apple core struck him on the shoulder, Wallace dismissed it with the remark, "That's all right, it'll wash off. That's just a bunch of anarchists." Wallace's running mate, General Curtis LeMay, said today that integration is the answer to the nation's racial problems. And he added that he thinks George Wallace agrees with his views. At a news conference in Miami, LeMay said, "Integration has worked in the armed forces, and it will also work in civilian life."
You people who want hours of relief from minor pains of arthritis and muscular aches, how many pain relievers do you know of that give you a second dose of pain relief before the first wears off? Measurin does, the first pain reliever with a built-in second dose. Measurin contains a double dose of aspirin in timed release form, so you take it just once every 8 hours instead of every 4. Convenient timed release Measurin with a built-in second dose for a long-lasting pain relief.
When you have acid indigestion, every second counts. So count on instant-acting Phillips tablets. Phillips tablets go to work in seconds. With one of the fastest stomach settlers ever discovered, each small Phillips tablet neutralizes more excess stomach acid than the leading antacid tablet that comes in a roll. So for fast relief from acid-upset stomach, when every second counts, count on instant-acting Phillips tablets.
President Johnson today signed the gun control bill into law, called it the most comprehensive so far, but said it still falls short of what is needed. He renewed his appeal to Congress for legislation to require registration of firearms and licensing of owners. In the president's words, if guns are to be kept out of the hands of the criminal, and out of the hands of the insane, and out of the hands of the irresponsible, then we just must have licensing. There was a hearing in Los Angeles today for Sirhan Sirhan, the man accused of killing Senator Robert Kennedy. CBS News correspondent Terry Drinkwater reports.
Sirhan's mother and older brother Adele came to court this morning to testify for Sirhan. At issue in today's pretrial hearing was an effort by the defense to bar the prosecution from using any evidence seized during a search of Sirhan's room in the family home, a search conducted only hours after Robert Kennedy was assassinated. On his way to court, Sirhan was somber. His attorney, Russell Parsons, said he is more and more contemplative, perhaps because the trial itself will probably not start until early next year. But in court, the young Jordanian immigrant was smiling and happy. At one point, he stood up and waved at his mother and brother. These sketches by CBS News artist Howard Brody. An investigating officer, William Brandt, testified that the items taken from Sirhan's room included 3 notebooks, a .22 caliber cartridge, and equipment used for weapons cleaning. Sirhan's attorney contends that since the officers did not have a search warrant, these items can't be used as evidence in court once the trial starts. The brother, Adel, testified that he informed the officers he had nothing to hide, but he said, "I told the police the house was not mine. My mother," he continued in slightly accented English, "owns the house, but I don't want her disturbed," end quote. Mary Sirhan, a small, quiet woman, said she did not give authorization for the search either. She testified, "I have never given permission." The prosecutor, Lynn Compton, cross-examined, and Adel Sirhan said he did use his own key to open the front door of the house for the police. Late this afternoon, Judge Walker ruled the search was legal and constitutional. The evidence will be admitted in court when the trial begins. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, Los Angeles.
4 West German government officials have died violently in the past 2 weeks, and today one of them was identified as a spy suspect. He was Rear Admiral Hermann Lüdke, who held a high position in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and who was found dead of gunshot wounds on the 8th of October. A government prosecutor said Lüdke may have photographed secret NATO documents for an unidentified foreign power. The case still is under investigation. The prosecutor also said there's no evidence so far of a connection between Lüdke and the other victims, at least 2 of them suicide cases. In a moment, another political report from Walter Cronkite on the candidates and the issues.
Honey, it's 3 in the morning.
I can't sleep.
When simple nervous tension keeps you awake, take Sominex as directed for 100% safe sleep.
Sominex contains 3 medical ingredients to bring on restful sleep.
Take Sominex tonight and sleep. Safe and restful sleep, sleep, sleep.
Take 2 Sominex tablets.
And sleep.
Now also in capsules, hundreds of sleep-inducing granules.
In every Sominex capsule. Try it.
Hi there. So what's he doing in my shop with his electric razor and Williams electric shave? Okay, so the electric shave does make your whiskers stand up. So it does lubricate your face and give you a close, comfortable shave. So, a shave that feels barber close with your electric razor? Sure enough. Look for the big L, first letter in.
Tonight, the second of our series of special reports on the issues of Campaign 68 and where the candidates stand deals with the ghettos, problems of jobs, income, housing, and education. In the absence of televised debates, we prepared a series of questions on the issues. Hubert Humphrey on October 9th and George Wallace on October 16th replied on film. Richard Nixon declined, but his staff made available videotapes of his campaign positions. The question tonight: what would you have the federal government do to help cities solve their grave problems?
Our cities are in dire trouble. They are incapable of getting out of that trouble on the income base that they presently have. Therefore, I have advocated and will, if I'm elected president, and if the economy will permit it, have what we call grants, or a return of funds to the states, for the purposes of the states to use those funds for some of the great needs that are presently
no strings attached.
That are presently evident there. The only strings that would be attached would be to try to find an appropriate formula, which would include the effort that the state made itself to tax its own people. Most people seem to feel that a per capita, that a census or population formula is the most desirable. We have other needs that need to be met. When I said the cities, I was primarily thinking in terms of the conditions of the ghetto. We have the problems of education. We have the health needs of our children. We have immense social needs in this country. But fortunately, when you meet those needs, you generally generate more income than you spend in order to alleviate them. I think we have now had enough experience to know and to demonstrate and to show that as you make investments in children, in their education, in people, in their health, as you make investments in urban renewal, you tend to increase the productivity of the person and of the community, which in turn returns to the federal government and the state and local government more of the resources than you ever invested in terms of rehabilitation.
First, we should have tax credits, what I call the Human Investment Act, to train the unemployed and to train the employed for higher positions so that they could move up. Give those tax credits to private industry, and that will mean they will have real jobs and that they will move up. Second, we should have tax credits to private industry to move into the ghetto areas and set up businesses. That will provide an opportunity for ghetto residents to move into those businesses, and I would trust move in as owners and managers and not just as workers. But third, you've got to have financial credits, and that means loans, not only through the Small Business Organization Administration, but also through a new lending organization, loans to ghetto businesses where people who are residents in the ghettos can become owners and managers rather than just workers of businesses that are brought in there. Let me put it this way. We not only have to put, if I could summarize it, we not only got to bring private enterprise into the ghettos, but the more important side of the equation, we've got to bring the residents of the ghettos into private enterprise as owners and managers and not just as workers. Because only when they get a piece of the action, only when they can stand tall as equals with others who are, shall we have a piece of the action, I think we're going to be making real progress in breaking down this wall that seems to divide the black community from the white community in the cities and in America.
Well, of course, they can use the existing vocational setups of the states to take some of the poverty money that's gone down the drain and down the rat hole and use it to retrain and train people for useful occupations and for pre-apprenticeship training. That's what they can do. Then they can also ask the industry through tax incentives or persuasion to build their branch plants in the future in the broad expanses of the states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, California, Alabama, and other states, so that all people will not find it necessary to seek industrial employment in the large urban centers of our country. Unless we do that, the overcrowding and abnormal growth of our cities and urban areas without proper planning creates problems for those who live there already and for those who come there. So let's utilize the broad expanses of this great nation of ours to spread people out. It's a long-range problem and a long-range plan, but we have to start on it sometime. And of course, the cities can be helped in their problems with transportation by the federal government because the federal government gets most all of the taxes. Until the day comes that we can gradually reduce federal taxes so the states could recoup through an effort of their own and spend the money as they see fit, then money has to come back from the federal government to help solve the problems. But I am for giving money back to the states and cities in block grants and let the local governments of the states and political subdivisions decide on the use of the money themselves instead of a great, large administrative staff in Washington trying to do that. I believe that you will not only save money on the federal level, but it will even be better in the long run at the local level.
Subsequent reports in this series will deal with such issues as the draft, the treaty to stop the spread of nuclear weapons, and the Vietnam War. Prices closed lower on the New York Stock Exchange today. Volume was 13,700,000 shares. The exchange index lost 17 cents. It had to happen in New York City, where the firemen are threatening a slowdown, the policemen are engaged in a slowdown, and the teachers are on strike. Today, more than 100 United Nations security guards called in sick, a move for higher wages.
This is the foot that kicked the skate, that swung the door, that hit the vase, that tipped the plant, that pushed the light, that struck the picture, that toppled the table, that knocked the radio, that scared the dog, that bumped the chair, that shoved the piano, that collapsed the wall, that belonged to the lucky guy who was insured by Continental Insurance. Continental doesn't just insure the ordinary things that can happen. We can even insure the things that just can't happen. But they do. Look for your Continental agent in the yellow pages.
Events tumble upon one another too rapidly to comprehend. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying, well, what it all signifies is Eric Severide's subject tonight. Eric?
Life is slowly working itself back to abnormalcy. The three astronauts have left the safety of space for the wild uncertainties of this Earth. The fantasy princess of the Western world has let herself be carried from the homeland over those wine-dark seas almost to Troy, where her face will smile upon, if not launch, 1,000 ships, mostly tankers. And in a couple of weeks there will be one chosen man ready for the misery of the White House, from which he will look back upon the present as days of joyous abandon. We can't all go back to the Greeks save through the books, which provide no evidence, incidentally, that either Aristotle the First or Socrates the First owned so much as a rowboat. What was inherited from them, among other things, was the unanswerable thesis that the good life for a person or a people is not possible save through moderation in all things. This generation, like many before it, does not try to answer the thesis, it just ignores it, and in so doing proves it. Glamour and passion seem to have become the realities, and wisdom is a drag. Everything must be outsized, larger than life, and what is larger than life is a distortion, as in the carnival's house of mirrors. The trouble could be that the distortions flashing and looming around and above us all have come too fast, one upon the other. There is a weird unreality about hunger and degradation in the middle of enormous wealth, about the spectacle of the world's mightiest power vainly bombing and smashing one of the world's weakest, about a tiny group of foul-mouthed militants shouting that they will burn the nation down and believing it. Those millions who would make force the chief instrument and police the chief citizens of a democracy dwell in the carnival house of mirrors. So do the extremist youth whose relation to the body politic is Freudian and who insist with piteous cries that the federal government become their parent or their lover. And Camelot, the Kennedy syndrome, now winding after the starkest tragedies towards its end, maybe this too was fantasy, a mirror image of Cinderella's royal court. But the clock strikes, the princess flees. The palace becomes again the plain and familiar meeting house for the continuing unglamorous agenda which concerns how plain people shall manage to live together with a greater measure of justice and equality. The original Aristotle and Socrates would have understood this and accepted it. Charles?
This is Charles Kuralt for Walter Cronkite, who returns tomorrow. Good night.
Can this exquisitely proportioned beauty survive? She's about to be tormented.